Not right now. I think it's working now.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. Excuse me, good to see you all. My name is Bill Cope. I'm coming to you from Champaign, Illinois, which is where Common Ground is based. I'm one of the founders of Common Ground, and I work at the University of Illinois. Common Ground is based in the research park of the university on the university campus. So welcome everybody. Before I introduce our special guest today, I want to thank Patricia Alonso, who's our the editor for our book series, for setting up this session and for being part of the whole process of getting these books together. So we have a really very, very nice book that we're going to be introducing to you today and speaking about. So I'm going to hand over to our hosts today, April Henning and Jesper Andreasson, who are going to talk a little bit about this this new series that we've created at Common Ground, and then about the first book in the series. So I'm going to hand over to you first, April, and thank you very much for being here and the wonderful work that you do.
Thanks, William. Thank you, Patricia, for inviting us along. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We've got just a few slides to talk us through, keep us on track. As William said, we are going to be talking about our book that is just recently out, which is called Hegemony in Sport. But before we get to the introduction to the actual book itself, we wanted to give you a bit of an overview of this teaching book series that we are working with Common Ground to really get started. So this is the Sport and Society Teaching Pocketbook series, and we call them pocketbooks because here's the physical copy of the book. They are almost quite literally able to fit into your pocket, or at least your bag. They are meant to be accessible books that are small, are in-depth enough to be useful, but that are something different from your traditional textbook. So as you can see, we're working with Common Ground and the Sport and Society book imprint on launching the series. The series is edited by our colleagues, Jörg Krieger, who's at the University of Aarhus, myself, Lindsay Parks-Piper, who's at the University of Lynchburg, and Jesper Andreasson, who is at Linnaeus University in Sweden, who's my co-author on this one, who we're going to hear from in a moment. Now, the point of this series is that basically Jörg and I were having a conversation one day about our frustrations finding materials to teach undergraduates and sort of beginning master's level students, because everything that we were coming across was a textbook that had something like 36 chapters, which doesn't make a lot of sense when you only have 12 to 15 teaching weeks, but that also cost several $100s or pounds, depending on where you are, or whatever your local currency is. But then when we look to sort of peer-reviewed journal articles, they tended to be a bit too advanced and didn't give enough context for the concepts, theories, examples that were being used for students to really understand them. So we were sort of stuck in this, the sort of textbook that has a lot of breadth but very little depth, and articles that were really deep but didn't give that sort of foundational understanding of what the articles were really about. So what we decided to do was come up with something that filled this gap. So this is where this idea of the teaching pocketbook series really came from. And the idea for these is that they, as academics, lots of us are researchers, but a big component of many of our jobs is actually teaching, and teaching that's pitched to undergraduate students, to master's level students, but that we need resources that we don't have to recreate every single time we want to plan a new course or develop a syllabus. So the idea is that we have some accessible depth. So the books are deep enough on whatever topic they are that you can actually sort of sink your teeth into it for a week of lessons, a couple lectures, a few seminars, whatever it is, however your courses are structured, but that they go in depth enough that you really get something out of it, but that they, are still general enough that they're not too advanced for the level of student that most of us are teaching. We also were really concerned about having convenient formats. So we chose this pocketbook style because we wanted them, you pick up a 36 chapter textbook and it's intimidating. No one wants to carry that around. The idea with these is that they're small, they're light, they're easy to put in your bag or pull up on your laptop or your tablet, even your phone to read these. So, you can read them while you're commuting. You can read them if you're sitting down in the library. You can sort of, access them whenever you need to or whenever you're able to. So, sort of reflecting sort of the real life of what our students have fed back to us about their, study practices. We also were really focused on including an online component and having some online resources. And this is meant to keep each of these texts flexible and dynamic. So as we all know, one of the frustrating things is that you find a really good example that you use for several years in a row, and then suddenly it stops being relevant because either the case has changed, or in my case, they no longer understand my cultural references. So, keeping these updated so that we have fresh examples that we can sort of add on to these, we can expand out where it makes sense using these online resources. So the books are sort of the basis, but we don't want this to be a static series. We want them to be flexible and able to adapt to the world as it changes and what our students need. The other thing that, of course, we're very focused on is affordability. And, we have to thank Common Ground so much for actually doing a great job in keeping these affordable, which makes them accessible. It's, again, we understand the realities of student life. Education, higher education is expensive. So, we want to make sure that we're actually producing something that is useful for both instructors and students. Now, currently within the series, we have two strands in the sort of sport and society imprint. So the first is a strand on social sciences, and the second is on humanities. So again, we're looking for, we have found and are looking for more people who are not just research academics, but who also engage directly in teaching and sort of, developing their own good teaching practice to help with some of these. So we've gotten a few early reviews of this series. There are currently, we have 3 books that are out, and the early reviews are very positive. This was from a colleague at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Lori Dance, who had some very nice things to say about how these actually help people who are maybe new to this field, but also people who do the instructing, the teachers. Actually sort of, build something around this. So, we're very, very happy to have gotten some very positive early reviews back. And of the series, we have 3 books that are available, or I think the third might be almost available. So we've got our book, Hegemony in Sport, which is in the social sciences strand that we'll be talking about today. The second book is The History of Physical Culture by Connor Heffernan, and this is in humanities series, where he talks about how physical culture has developed and in reference to sort of broader society, as well as sort of medicine and scientific understanding of things. And then the third book is on the 1936 Berlin Olympics by Jules Boykoff, who is I can't say enough about his work in and around the Olympic movement and critiques of the Olympic movement. So understanding his view of the 1936 Olympics and its place in history and the development of both the Olympics and sport is really, really interesting. So, we've just gotten started. So these are what are available now. And what we have in the pipeline is also really exciting. So these are a few of the titles that we've already lined up, that we have authors that are in various stages of developing their manuscripts for these. So we have Gender, Performativity, and Sport, Sport and Touch, which I'm actually really excited about. I had never considered this, but from sort of a PE coaching perspective, is actually really interesting. We have a book on drug use in sport. This one is almost ready for production, written by Kate McLean at Penn State. Sport, Recreation, and Settler Colonialism, which is in the humanities thread, which is another one that I'm actually very excited about because this is not something that is in my area of expertise. And then we have the ... So this is what we've currently got in the pipeline. And we are hoping that some of you will join the pipeline. And if you have an idea for a teaching book, something for the series, something that you teach, something that you're interested in developing for others to teach, please get in touch with us. So we have the humanities editors, which Jörg Krieger and Lindsay Piper, and then we have the social sciences editors, which are Jesper and I. So if you have an idea, please, give us a short synopsis in an email, send it through, and we will start a conversation. Not everything, will be necessarily developed from, on the basis of a synopsis, but, we do want to, start a conversation around what the needs are for both teaching and learning. Again, please do get in touch with us. So now we'll go ahead and move on to the focus of this session, which is our book. So I'll go ahead and turn over to Jesper to give you the sort of introduction to that.
Thanks. Just in case, I just dropped out from the meeting and then I got back, so I missed the last minute or so, but I think I'm on track. Okay, thanks for the presentation of the series, April. So I have the opportunity here to talk about our book also, and how it's part of the series. The title then, Hegemony in Sport, but it also has a subtitle, which is on the cover, and it's Power Through Culture in Theory and Practice. And I think also the subtitle is important for our idea with the book in a way. So we are not going to go into detail about the book, but we will try to say something more on our ideas with it, perhaps letting this serve as an illustration of how we approach the series and the ambition with the series. Okay, so what to expect then? Yeah, first of all, it's I think April mentioned it. It's not a teaching book. It is a teaching book. It's not research. Sorry. So it is a teaching book. So we have used our own research to kind of evaporate or discuss the theories we use. We have used secondary literature, but this has mainly been done to illustrate our argument. And in this case, it has been to show how discussions about power and power relationships can be analyzed and how they can be used and applied. And in relation to this, it might be also worth mentioning that all books in the series are not intended to look the same. We have focused in a way on application of theory, and others may describe other stuff, historical events, other themes, and such, which I think the three books currently out also show or illustrate. Okay, so for the idea of application and the interrelatedness or the intersection between theory and practice, theory and data, this was important for us when we tried to write up the book. I guess one thing we thought was that many students we meet often express the difficulties to putting theory to work and how to use theory and engage in analysis, which often came out as flat somehow, which is something we all struggle with, I guess. And in our research, we have written quite a bit on issues of power and dominance, with some studies on how hegemonic masculinity impact on women in team sports, among female dopers, and more. And we have been interested in issues that concern governmentality. So soon we kind of decided that the concept of hegemony was like a good point of departure, trying to say something about how can we understand power and how power operates in different settings and how power can operate through culture rather than brute force. Still with the overarching idea of also addressing the interrelatedness of theory and data and how theory can be applied. So in that sense, what to expect, we had two ambitions, one could say. So one was on hegemony, the main title, to understand hegemony in sport, and the other one was to really address the application of theory and the relationship between theory and data, which is the subheading then. Okay, April, the table of contents for the book.
Yeah, so rather than going super specifically into the sort of the content of the book, because as Jesper said, we're not presenting, advancing the theory in any way. This is really a synthesis. It's a teaching tool. We thought we'd cover the table of contents and then a few specific things. So the book is laid out, again, in a way that we hope is very accessible. So we have an introductory chapter that basically lays out what this book is and how students might use it. This includes things like making sure that we have some, keywords that are bolded out, but, we're attempting really not to talk down to students in any way. We want to highlight things, but not sort of preach or pander. In the introduction, we also sort of lay out the use of guiding questions at the end of each chapter and further readings. So resources that students or instructors can take up, questions that can be used for discussion or just further thought, however you want to use them, but things that we thought would be helpful if we were designing a class or a week of classes around this topic. The second is where we do some of the conceptual work, and this is where we sort of trace the development of hegemony and how this has become a thing. So the introduction focuses more on the sort of broader topic of power and how, theories of power, conceptualizations of power have changed. Chapter 2 is where we really dig into hegemony and where hegemony came from. So we talk about this sort of developmental work and how the concept has become how we use it later on in the book. Chapters 3 and 4 are then really our sort of illustrative application chapters. So as Jesper said, one thing that we really wanted to do was sort of show how we can link data with theory or with a concept or conceptualization that we're working with. So how is this actually done in practice? So we actually just illustrate it with some of our own work. And this draws from our previously published work. So the hegemonic masculinity team sports draws heavily on Jesper's years and years of field work on these issues. And then the fourth chapter is drawn from one of our joint projects on sport governance and anti-doping. So, we look here at the sort of, two different ways of understanding hegemony, one with regard to gender hegemony, hegemonic masculinity, and then the second in terms of governance and policy hegemony. So really looking at this in two different ways to, sort of further highlight how this concept can be used and applied to things that students might be doing. And then in the conclusion, this is where we try to sort of bring it all together and talk about, how did we get from sort of broad ideas and understandings of power to talking very specifically about, some of these more applied topics and, ask further questions, point in new directions and sort of just generally, bring things together as we see it. And then, of course, we do have the further information and reading, and it's all linked into the digital sources as well. One of the things that we focus on in that second chapter there is conceptualization. And so to sort of give an example of what these chapters read like in this book, and as Jesper said, not all the books look alike, but ours is sort of heavily focused on this notion of hegemony and what that is and how it can be used, how we can use it to see the world or understand whatever sporting topic we're looking at. The way that we've approached this is to actually just build out a conceptualization based on how this has developed. So again, we start with these sort of broader understandings of power, from brute force power to more softer social power, cultural power, and then move into hegemony and how hegemony sort of leverages all of this to work. But how hegemony is always a process, right? Something that's continuous, that we can't just pin down and say, oh, that's hegemony, we'll stick a pin in that and it's done, we understand it. This is a dynamic concept that sort of allows us to see both how things, how power relations are sort of reinforced, but also how they can be challenged and disrupted. So we try to show that in both of the application chapters as well. We also have some focus on some of the key theorists. So of course, as sociologists, we, hit the big names when we're talking about power. So we've got our Weber, we've got our Marx, we've got our Foucault. But then, of course, we do have specific focus on Gramsci and particularly Gramsci's conceptualization of hegemony, but also then what came after Gramsci. So we didn't just stop there. So we really build out, how this has developed through each of these differing positions, and sort of highlighted a bit of where they agree and where they disagree, and how some of their conceptualizations diverge. And of course, our understanding of hegemony is going to be different from what theirs is, and the way that we use it might not be exactly how others use it, and that's okay. But so we do try to give these examples of hegemony. So in that second developmental chapter, where we're talking specifically about what hegemony is and how we've gotten there, we do give some examples. So we have an example of family life and gender, and these types of things, where we try to put some flesh on it before we go directly into sort of those application chapters. So Jesper, I'll hand to you for application.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, you said a lot about the application, actually.
Sorry.
I'll try to add something more. So the focus. Obviously, the focus is on the sport context, but we are aiming for more of a multidisciplinary approach, and to use examples that are relevant also for other fields or disciplines like cultural studies, sociology, gender studies, history, and more. So we also tried in terms of application to look at quite different examples of how hegemony play out. So April, you mentioned one of the chapters we use ethnographic data, and we paid an interest in how men's ways of joking around in the locker rooms could be understood in relation to hegemonic notions of masculinity, and also how women soccer players deal with marginalization in sport more broadly. So one thing in the study of locker room was, for example, that not all players were able to live up to the idealized image of masculinity, the standard in this collective. So what we tried to do in that section was to illustrate diverse masculinities, and explain how some were seen as more right and others not, which impacted the player statuses, and for example. And as mentioned, we also looked at the governance and how the WADA hegemony in anti-doping manifest was challenged in some cases. So in terms, what we wanted to do with these quite diverse in terms of more social psychology, looking into the locker room mentality and the joking around, and then looking at governance. In terms of application, the overarching idea was to kind of illustrate how hegemony can be used in different contexts. It can be used as a conceptual tool, and it can be used with other concepts like culture, dominance, power. It can be developed in terms of hegemonic masculinity, and have that sort of adding. And in doing so, the ambition was to illustrate the so to speak, the transferency of theory, how a concept can be used to understand what is happening in quite different settings, and also how it can be developed or coupled with other concepts. So we can understand that the dominance of certain supernatural organizations and ways of having a laugh in a locker room at the expense of others may have more similarities than one would think. So I think that was one idea, I guess, to line up several examples to illustrate how this theoretical tool can help us to understand not only what is going on here. Yeah, I think that was our idea or ambition anyway. Anything else, April?
No, that's pretty much sums it up. So we'll go ahead and move on to
Okay.
sort of the digital resources. So I'm going to attempt something very tricky, which is switching the screen that I'm sharing. And I'm guessing that you're still seeing the PowerPoint slides. Yep. Okay. So yes. All right, excellent. Look at that. Learning new Zoom skills all the time. My university is a Teams university, so Zoom is still a bit of a mystery to me. So as you can see, we have these digital resources for each of the teaching books, and this is the page where you land with the link for our digital resources. Nope, that is not the page. Oh, sigh. There we go. That's the right page. So this is the for our book. So as you can see, it's got the link to the bookstore, series information, but then down here are actually the sort of videos, blog posts, recordings, what have you, that we thought might be useful in teaching practice to use with students. So we have here just the three main chapters. So the conceptualization chapter, where we talk about how hegemony has developed, the chapter on hegemonic masculinity in team sport, and the chapter on sport governance and hegemony of WADA. So the idea here is that this is where we're going to start. And as hopefully we get some feedback, we get new ideas, more things are published, new cases spring to life in the real world, that we then link to these here so that we can then keep them sort of all in one place in sort of a repository around things related to this. So, you know, thinking through how we might use some of these. Well, if we're talking about the development of hegemony and particularly hegemonic masculinity, well, there's this helpful video, an interview with Raewyn Connell, who's done loads in the development of this concept and this framework. So, you know, I would give that a watch with my students, or at least ask them to watch it to sort of get a grounding in, you know, how this person felt that this was going to develop, what they intended to do with it, and how it's gone from there. You know, in the second chapter, you know, we're talking about hegemonic masculinity and team sport. And here, you know, one of the sort of emerging issues that we'll all be familiar with is the question of trans athletes in sport. So here we have, you know, something that links to this idea of, you know, hegemony and gender hegemony. But what about transgender athletes, and how do they fit into this? And what kind of discussion might this spark with students and you know, get us thinking on. So, you know, we've included, you know, this type of blog post that we might assign as sort of an accompanying reading. We've also got some videos, some podcasts. So here, one of the things that Jesper is particularly expert at is this notion of gender and family life, particularly around sport. So, you know, this one seemed appropriate, Daughters and Dads, and how dads can actually have a role in empowering change around gendered ideas of sport, which links right into this idea of hegemonic gender. You know, then for this third chapter, where we have, you know, we're looking at institutional hegemony or organizational hegemony, however you want to understand that. You know, we've got here, you know, playing the game, the soft power of sport. You know, as we know, you know, sport and sport governance is international, it's global, it's powerful. So, you know, here we've got, you know, sort of a different take on it, a take from outside of the academy. So, you know, all of these resources are intended to, you know, be used as you wish. These are just things that we thought were interesting that linked in. So, you know, it's really almost a choose your own adventure type book in that way. So I'll go back here. And go ahead.
Okay, so and to finalize, we would like to invite you all to contribute to this. This book and other books in the series are not intended to be finished, as April mentioned, once and for all. So instead, if you use the series in teaching, please let us know how you use it and what works and what possibly doesn't work. We also have the possibility to update with new material and ways to discuss the content of the different books. And you also might feel that there's another topic that really is needed. So our invitation also concerns ideas for new books in the series. So if you have an idea on something that is missing, don't hesitate to email. And we can have a discussion about that. So I think, like, hopefully we could build like a good solid platform with with solid knowledge that can be really used for students in diverse settings and disciplines. And I think it would be great to hear your reflection on this. So I'll leave the, I don't know, what do you say? The table open or the discussion open? Or...
Yes, I think that's my cue to stop sharing so that we can just go back to the normal screen. And yeah, then I don't know, I'll turn it over to Patricia. You know, we're happy to answer questions you might have.
Thank you, April. If you want, you can just open your mic, ask any question that you're interested in or comment. You can also use the chat. We'll read the question if you prefer it that way. Also, I have left some links in the chat to the Sport and Society Teaching Book series, so you can check the other titles in the series, as well as the digital resources page. I'm also going to send you a link with the bookstore to check the book if you're interested in ordering, with a promo code that you can use to get 25% off. Yeah.
I wonder whether I might just put some of the other folks here on the spot. So I know a lot of people will be watching this as a recording. So I forgot to welcome all the people who are watching it asynchronously as well. So, but thank you for the people who are able to come synchronously. And I just wonder if the other people there, you know, it's just so it's not a very, you know, we get a bit of sort of interaction here. Whether each of you might like to introduce yourselves and say, you know, how you regard these issues of power to be a part of what you do. I mean, you know, how does this connect with you, these ideas? But also, I'd like to know who the other folks are in the room. Could I get, someone just went, but fair enough, because we've been on for 35 minutes, but I'm just wondering if some of the other people might like to introduce yourself. You know, if I can just ask each of you to say hello and who you are, and a little bit, just so we get to know you, if nothing else. So we've got Stephanie, Yao. There's Stephanie. Thank you very much.
Of course, how are y'all? I know it's always so weird when you leave your video off and it's like, there's someone actually there, but they are. No, I just yes, there is a human being here. No, I really enjoyed this, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Oklahoma, and I utilize Hegemony a lot in my own work on sport. And so it's also a very difficult topic to explain, and when you teach it and you work with other students. And so this looks like a very digestible way to broach hegemony in sport with students. And so I really enjoyed your talk today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Jesper, welcome.
Hi there. So I have a dog next to me that's about to bark. So apologies if she, yeah. So I have treats in my hand that, you know, are going to keep her quiet for a second. But so yeah, my name is Jesper Boyles. I am a postdoctoral researcher at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And I'm a public health scholar and an LGBTQ health scholar specifically, but my dissertation was around sports and inclusion for queer folks and their experiences in those settings. So yeah, certainly relevant to my work, and particularly interested in the examples of masculinities in sports that you've presented. And yeah, so as I venture off into a hopefully, you know, faculty position in the future, you know, something I could use with students as well. So, so yeah, thanks.
Wonderful, fantastic, and thank you for that. And the next one, the label is Dr. Cecilia Brantley.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. I had some problems with connecting.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and As I said, I'm in Chicago. I did my dissertation on women in male-dominated sports and their perception and willingness to compete. And I want to kick myself because in my key words, I didn't put hegemonic, and I talked about that throughout my whole dissertation. But when you say male-dominated, that is a synonym, I guess, for hegemony. And I want to thank you for saying if you had any ideas. I mean, life happens, and before you know it, you said, oh, I'm gonna get back to my research and extend it. I reached out to some of my dissertation chair, and they're busy and all of that. So next thing I know, COVID happened, and I kind of froze. But in terms of the word hegemonic, I love how it was presented here. And just quickly, some ideas that I wanted to continue, and maybe some of the other scholars will pick that up in your book, and that is the glass ceiling is old. And we wanted to kind of update that with the glass cliff. And then also in terms of hegemony, I wanted to expand it out. I started at sports, of course, because I needed to prove the theory that risk is something that's not only experienced by men, but women today have taken over with risk. So I had several concepts, but getting back to what I wanted to expand upon, just to reiterate quickly, the glass cliff is old, and now we're looking at the what is it? The glass cliff is replacing the glass ceiling. I'm sorry. And then hegemonic, I wanted to look at other industries that men are dominating, and now you see women taking over in those areas. So thank you for being here and letting me be a part of this platform.
Thank you very much. And then we have Jiao. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly.
Yes, it's good to talk to you. You can call me John. It's easier. It's a good translation. John, that's okay. I'm from Brazil, as you can see. I don't speak fluently English. I will try to communicate in a few words. I like your topic, hegemony on sports. And I would try to think and probably apply this concept to football. That is a very important trace of cultural. It's an important issue in my country. And because of the recent changes in football clubs management in Brazil, some restructuration and managing the changes, we can see a tendency to just a few clubs to win because they have much power. So I think we can apply this idea of hegemony in Brazil, in the football clubs, because they are only a few ones becoming richer and powerful, and probably it will be a tendency just like it occurred in Europe. We have a top 10 clubs which won all the major titles in the last decades. So I think this movement in Brazil and in South America, it's a driving movement from Brazil, from Brazilian clubs. I think we can apply this idea. So I was interested to watch, to see what you have to share, and I will buy the book and try to reflect a little bit more about this issue. I'm sorry because of my bad fluency in English, but I'm trying to communicate. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks. Please do not apologize for that. My goodness.
That's right. No, that was great. So yeah, well, and thank you. Look, thank you everybody for speaking now. They were very powerful statements about the importance of this issue. So that was really great to hear your voices. So yeah, back to you, April and Jesper.
Yeah, just a reflection was that I mean, you're obviously interested in gender and power dynamics in sport to a large extent, and I think there's much to be said, and there's much to be developed on these issues. I think both April, at least me, I struggle a lot when writing this. I think it was a challenge to kind of address it in a hands-on way, in a pedagogical approach, and to kind of how can we approach concepts that are really complex and theories that are really complex, and how can we reduce them to simplicity without taking the essence of the complexity out. So I think that it was kind of a learning process for me, at least, and it can be done better, of course, but it was good fun and interesting to try to think about all these theories you read about, and you can have them in your head, and you can apply them in articles and stuff, but when you can to write about them in a textbook, it's for teaching, it's something else, really.
Yeah, and I think Jesper and I always sort of joke that, I still don't understand hegemony. It's one of these things that, we've used it in books, we've used it in articles, and I still struggle to always get my head around it, because it is always changing, and the examples are always changing, and there are a million different ways to interpret and identify. And I think that came through in the writing of this, and I'm sure I see lots of nodding, so I'm glad I'm not the only one who's experienced this in the writing process, where you sort of you become so familiar with something or one way of thinking about it, that then when you need to, as Jesper says, sort of think about it in a different way or from a different perspective for a different audience, it's like you suddenly freeze and you're like, how am I going to do this? And I guess that's the thing about teaching, and that's the problem of relying on our level of doctoral level research for undergraduate students, right? That's not written for them, right? We don't write that for them, and in some ways it seems like we don't even think about it that way for them. We think about that for whoever's out there reading that stuff, right? Us. But that is really the struggle in all of this, and sort of simplifying that down and trying to almost reteach yourself how you got there. Going back to what I read as an undergrad and using that is in a book to sort of wow, I've had a 30-year relationship with understanding power. How has it been that long? But it's very interesting. And Jesper also likes to joke that we chose this topic because it is the one that's hardest for me. So maybe if we actually write a book about it, I'll finally figure it out. We have a very fun collaboration, as you might have guessed.
I'd like to add that I was impressed how you connected hegemony with power. I had connected it with just the dominant gender, meaning that, well, if you're in an environment, it's all men, then, the woman is just actively looked at as being lesser of the counterpart. And so when you have a dominant gender, power is dominating. So I just liked how those two thoughts were parallel.
Yeah, that was that sort of dynamic relationship. So our main collaboration, Jesper and I, we look at the question of substance use and doping in sport and fitness, and heavy on the fitness. And so, looking at those relationships, you do see a lot of sort of the gender hegemony, but that definitely plays out in this sort of power dynamic way, where we have one group, women, who tend to be, marginalized from these communities. And looking at it through the lens of hegemony, and there's a bit of that in here, but how looking at that power dynamic through this sort of shows how this is reinforced within these communities in ways that you might not think of. So even in the online environment, sort of men speaking over women, you know, sort of pushing their expertise to the side, or, you know, really centering themselves as the experts, rather than, you know, it being sort of co-equal, whoever has knowledge and expertise is the expert. We sort of see it play out that way. But then, you know, we do have those really interesting challenges to that situation, where there are women who are, you know, coming back in and sort of reasserting themselves, or pushing back against this sort of, you know, men sort of pushing their way in and saying, you know, it's all about us, and women going, actually, no, like we're here too. Our needs, our interests matter, you know, in various different ways of doing that. So we do, you know, look at those sorts of relationships, and, you know, Jesper has applied this in loads of different ways that I, you know, haven't, in terms of gender and his ethnographic field work and things like that. So yeah.
Well, I have to say something else, excuse me, but if I can call you April, that is something that I also looked at when you mentioned hegemonic and power, and I'm focusing on the female aspect of it. The word that kept coming out in my research was they've got a lot of nerve going into a male-dominated atmosphere and exuding their thoughts and taking over. And so the word that connected to me to express that situation is risk-taking. So that kind of came out in my research. But I also liked in the book where you have your resources, and you said daughters and dads empowering change women in sports. And because I focused on motorsports, that was the first baseline that I saw the girls or the women learning that particular sport from their dads. And then when that industry started to infiltrate with women, then you change the dynamics. And now I'm seeing in my research, and that is kind of happening more in that context of motorsports environment. The daughters are now learning from their mothers. So I see the torch kind of passing on, if you will, where, in my research, I said, we have to thank the men, because it was the men that let the women in, those that were understanding and kind, and said, hey, I have nothing against women. I want you to learn. If you like what I'm doing, I want to teach you. So we always say in our research that men were the first ones in that industry. And I think sometimes women get so boaster and strong that we forget to thank them for letting us in. And so now that they've let us in, women are now taking over, in the sense, from having their daughters learn from them versus in the beginning, daughters learning from dads. Thank you, that's all.
Yes, well, speaking of daughters and dads, I think Jesper might have a commitment to head off to. So I think if we are good on questions, we can say thank you so much to everyone for joining us and hearing about this book and the series. And we do hope that you keep in touch. So if you, as Jesper said, if you do use the book, if there are examples, if there are things that you think we can improve on the digital resources, if there's topics you'd like included or that have been useful for you, please let us know how you've done it, because we really do want this to be something that we co-create with people who are in the teaching world, so that it is useful and that we're sharing the best practice that we can. And also if you have ideas for your own books, I see a few of you new scholars out there, we're looking for new ideas. So let us know, what you're up to and what you're interested in, and how you might develop something for around your own interest, your own teaching. And we're very happy to have those conversations. So thank you all very, very much. And thank you to Jesper, particularly, for putting up with me.
Yeah.
Thank you to Jesper and April for making this wonderful contribution to the field. Yes, wonderful. Good to be with you today, and great discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.